I just happened to be looking at Vatican News, and a story came up about an audience where two different female religious communities had a private audience with the Pope. And one community was on one side of the room and the other community was on the other, which I thought interesting. I'm not sure if they're connected or not, but it was interesting. One community all had a religious habit, right? And they all had young vocations. When you look at their social media, they seem to have their act together. They seem to have an identity. Whereas the other community has a very aging religious community, a few young vocations, and a very diverse way of dressing themselves. Some with a habit, some with a veil, some without it. You wouldn't be on one side. You could see who they are. There, on the other side, you would struggle to see who they are. I just it's an interesting phenomenon that has cropped up in the last 50 years in the church about religious identity, about the habit, you know, and with a lot of discussion. Some people saying, look, the habit doesn't make the monk, which is certainly true. The habit doesn't make the monk. But it's also a way of advertising. It's free advertising. Without a shadow of a doubt, you're looking at somebody dressed, for example, a Dominican walking around in white. That is totally countercultural to today's world. People that were so secular, when somebody like a Dominican walks in and he's dressed all funny with a white thing and maybe sometimes a black cloak, and people are with rosaries. If you're not Catholic, you're wondering, what is this guy? I've never seen this before. Is he a pope? Or, with some people that don't understand. And it drives a conversation where if a guy walks in with jeans and a top, he's just another guy, just another person. And I witnessed this in the 1980s in our secondary school, the Sisters of Mercy. They were going through this secular whatever program that they were doing. And when I started school, some of the nuns had habits, and when I finished school, they had done a sabbatical and come back, and they weren't wearing the habit anymore. I remember the older nuns in the convent. People remember Athboy, for example, Sister Frances or Sister Carmen. Sister Frances, I remember asking her about. I said, Sister, why are you still wearing the habit and the others aren't? She says, well, look, when I entered, this is how I dress, and I'm going to continue on dressing like this. A little bit like Sister and Mother Angelica, who reverted back to wearing the habit. And you can have this discussion all you like, but it does drive questions in people's minds when you see somebody dressed as a habit. Even in the business world, this phenomenon in the last 20 years with Steve Jobs, who would dress the same all the time. And his logic was, look, I don't have to spend time looking for what I'm going to wear, walking in, and he's giving a presentation to thousands of people, and it's going worldwide. He was always dressed the same. Mark Zuckerberg and others. You don't have to spend time, talking about the what you're going to wear. When I go to work, and I've worked for 23 years, we wear the same thing for the last 23 years. Don't have to worry. You can walk into work with anything on, in the sense that we wear the same clothes all the time. And, because what is the purpose of what we work at in a secular world? Well, what is the purpose of what we're doing in the religious life? Is to be countercultural, is to drive a conversation that is against the culture. The culture today is show it all. It's all about the body, gyms. You see the slogans, get ripped for the summer in 6 weeks, and yada 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 yada. Whereas as in religious communities, if you're going to give us a message that is different to the world's message, it's fascinating to see the habit, the Franciscan habit, the Dominican habit, a priest walking in a cassock. You know, if every priest in Ireland reverted back to using the cassock, you would see a sea change in Ireland, in Irish Catholicism. I mean, in Poland, I often see priests, secular priests in the sense diocesan priest, wearing the habit, wearing the cassock. This is their form of dress. Often. And in other countries. Whereas in Ireland, you'd be hard pressed to see a priest in a cassock anymore. Maybe some of the traditional priests, Institute of Christ the King, or FSSP, or SSPX, and so forth. But it is few and far between the priest that will take up the challenge of wearing a cassock. I mean, that's how the Core of Irish dressed. And when Vatican II came along, it never said, now, diocesan priests, please do not wear the cassock anymore. Because we've gone from one extreme, and I don't call it an extreme, I'm just saying we've gone from one thing to the completely opposite, where you wouldn't know a priest half the time. Even in the holy sacrifice of the Mass, sometimes when there's concelebration, there's no effort made to actually dress as a priest. You're a part of a sacred mystery, and you've just thrown a stole over yourself. And the most bland stole sometimes. You know, when you contrast what is going on in other churches, in for example, and I give the example of the Syro-Malabar Church, where all of the priests made an effort to be dressed in their sacred vestments that hold with their tradition as Syriac Christians. I just think it's a fascinating phenomenon in the church, and how the church has to say, you know what? It's free advertising, I say. It's free advertising. You dress as a religious, you're giving a message, a visual message that is countercultural to this world. I absolutely do think that the Dominicans holding their identity together in Ireland have shown a witness of something that they actually believe in. As a team, as a religious community, driving questions into people's minds. And they have vocations every single year. They have our ordinations every single year. Why is that? They have a mission. They have a theology. They have a spirituality. They have history. They've got an identity. That is something that is challenging Irish Catholics. Whereas our 26 dioceses and God knows how many bishops are trying to revive Take a Risk for Christ a vocational program, but there isn't that strong push united in Ireland to do that. I mean, take a risk for Christ, but oftentimes many priests sadly won't even take a risk to wear their priestly garment identity. You're a priest, don't be ashamed of it. Put on a cassock. I guarantee you, the first priest that does this, I am absolutely sure the parishes where a priest wears a cassock will be the parishes where you'll get vocations. People will look at that man saying, do you know what? He has put on an identity that is challenging this world. It is from another era, an era when we had a lot more vocations. Try it. Don't be afraid of it. And we see this happening in so many communities around the world. We see this strong religious identity. You often see, is it the priests at home of the mother? They wear a cassock. You see it with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. Their habit, it's the same habit that they all have. You can identify them. You would identify as a Dominican. You will identify. I firmly believe that throwing out so many things after the reforms of Vatican II, which were never discussed there. The council talk about habits being practical, but it never taught that you should get rid of them. And, there was a thing where, before Vatican II, some of nuns had very ornate veils and so forth that, maybe weren't as practical as needed. But, when you go into you see in the Orthodox world, a monk is dressed as a monk and a sister is dressed as a sister. It's the same dress, Maudatus, all of the different monasteries, all of the monks are dressed in the same way. Going to a Benedictine monastery, the monks are dressed in the same way. As I said, I think the church needs to learn a lesson. It is filtered into the business world. What is a businessman going to spend his time on? Not chasing the latest fashion and showing up with a different shirt or different designer every day. No. Steve Jobs and others, these multi-millionaires are not chasing the latest fashion. And that says something. Why do we even have to worry about the latest fashion in religious life? It's just my thoughts. I've never seen, you wouldn't know, for example, if you look at the Jesuits, you wouldn't know you've ever met a Jesuit. If to see them on the street, you wouldn't know. Supposedly they don't really have a typical Jesuit habit as such. But, in all of the iconography of or pictures of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, you see him dressed in a specific way. And that's represented over the centuries. Maybe if Jesuits actually dressed like their own founder, you might drive a conversation that is countercultural in this world. But some will argue, no, it's all about the heart and it's all about the person and its personal relationship with God. The external habit doesn't matter at all. It's free advertising, I say. It's free advertising. Any Joe So that's sitting on a train, dressed in ordinary clothes, is just sitting there. A priest that's sitting there, you will ask, you might run up to him. And I'll give you one example. I'll give you one clear example on this. Father Michael Donnelly, missionary of the sacred of the Holy Eucharist, in France. I remember going to the cave of St. Mary Magdalene last year, 7th of October in the afternoon. And I remember going up to the cave, the Holy Spirit leading me up there. And there was Father Michael Donnelly sitting, kneeling in front of the Holy Eucharist in the cave, in a cassock. Now, if he happened to be sitting there in jeans and a t-shirt, I wouldn't have said anything to him or approached him. But because he happened to be in a cassock and he turned to leave the cave, I said to Father, do you mind if you hear my confession? I wouldn't have asked him had he not been in a cassock or dressed as a priest. Do you know what I mean? It is something that drives, that the Holy Spirit will use for priests to minister. And unless Irish priests get their act together, you have free advertising there, put on a cassock, people will approach you as a priest if you're dressed with a clerical collar. A lot of priests, I've heard this numerous times, they are ashamed to dress as a priest. The lugs, the this, the... Take a risk for Christ. Be a priest. Dress as a priest. Put on a cassock. Put on a beretta. Take a risk. Dress as him. And see what our Lord uses that. It's free advertising. The Dominicans are not afraid to dress as Dominicans. It is a brand. It is an identity. It is advertising. It's a simple thing. They don't have to worry about wardrobes or the latest fashion or what they're going to wear. It works. Same with Franciscans. I honestly do think that the business world is confirming what the church has been doing for millennium. in the sense that, what is important. Steve Jobs would say, well, what is important? Well, it's not important that I'm dressing with different tops every day and stuff like this. That's waste of time in decision making. What am I going to put on? I'm just going to put on the same every day. And Zuckerberg and other people have followed that lead. Well, it's the same in religious life. And, I think we need to draw awareness in this. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. If you were bringing somebody in to do a consultant, I've often worked with consultants. You want to change something in your organization. You want to improve something. You bring in consultants, McKinsey's or Deloitte or some, these we're leading consultants, and they explore your processes, they look at your processes, and then you meet up and you say, well, look, you're doing this, this, and this, but you need to change to this industry standard. You need to this. It's working well in this industry. So you hear feedback from consultants who work with different companies on streamlining processes. It's this, in the Catholic Church, I often wonder, we are so confused sometimes. You say, well, this process is working, a habit. You're saving time with decision making. You're saving time with clothes. You're streamlining a simple thing of what you dress. It's free advertising. It's free advertising into the world. It's the benefits are there. The logical benefits, apart from the spiritual benefits and so forth. The congregations and religious orders that have an identity seem to have vocations, whereas those after Vatican II that threw off the habit are dying off, which is true. It is true. Like the Sisters of Mercy in Ireland will be gone in 20, 30 years. They have no Irish vocations. Such a strong congregation at one stage with thousands of members, and all of a sudden it stopped. It stopped, which is quite incredible to think of. The Redemptorists in Ireland. Need I say more? What happened? What happened to their religious identity? What happened to their mission? And people say it's not a criticism of them, it's just an observation. This world is yearning for Christ, and yet we have to open minds and hearts and use all the tools available to engage. And that is important, guys. Does the church not see that? I just thought, anyway, this audience with the Pope, two different communities, one community and another community. It was just a fascinating observation, and to see one community, all with a habit, all with vocations at different levels, and another, different habits, different veils. Would you know one community from the other? Yes, the other one had this red cross, very distinctive. Clearly we know who these guys are. The others all dressed differently. I wouldn't know them if I met them. Do you know? And I think, you walk around Ireland, you go into an event in Ireland, the Dominicans at, you will know who a Dominican is. You wouldn't know who a parish priest is sometimes. And we're struggling, we have no vocations, the most basic things we don't do, we're not doing properly. If you're going to give your life to Christ, dress like a priest. Be counter-cultural, and see what happens. God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.